You can't build a relationship or connect with an audience if they don't understand what you're sending them. So, given that most financial aid communications fail that test, I would start there first, honestly. Prompting a family to take action when they don't really understand what you're sending them, or let's say a 17-year-old whose parents didn't go to college. They're struggling to understand the words and the jargon and the terminology that's in the emails that are being sent out. So I would say fix that first.
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Tiers from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission of Mission podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission of Mission is part of the Enrollify podcast network. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversation, so let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 19 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Those of you who know me well know that I'm drawn to other highly motivated people who have a passion not only for self-improvement, but also for helping others. Tara Durante is definitely one of those people, and the main topic that we're going to focus our time on today is arguably the hardest and most confusing part of the college search process for students, families, and honestly, even a lot of college admissions counselors and marketers. That topic is financial aid. So let's not waste any time and dive right in. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Jeremy.
So Tara, what's the number one communication mistake that, in your experience, you feel like a lot of admissions and financial aid staff make when it comes to talking about that topic with students and families?
The first mistake is assigning the wrong resources to telling that story.
Okay, so expand on that for us.
If you're an enrollment manager, think about your financial aid communications. That's a term that most people aren't familiar with. It doesn't really roll off the tongue yet, financial aid communications, but that's an area specialty for me. And so if you're an enrollment management leader, your number one problem is probably that your financial aid communications aren't written by someone who has financial aid knowledge as well as higher ed comms experience and expertise. It's usually someone in the financial aid office who isn't a web copywriter, doesn't have that skill, or isn't adept at that because they're adept at financial aid, which is a difficult topic in and of itself. Or it's someone on the comms or admissions side writing it, and they don't really understand financial aid from a practitioner standpoint. And so I would say that the number one mistake is, and unfortunately, you get what you get. You end up getting communications that are either vague, written by someone who doesn't understand the topic fully, or they read like a dense wall of text, which you don't want your students and families to have to struggle through to make an enrollment decision.
So where's the balance there? Because to your point, you don't want it to feel like you're vomiting a bunch of information that they may not even understand, they being the reader, but yet you want it, I would argue, to feel like, okay, this is something that is actually going to be helpful.
The North Star should be exactly what you said. The communications should be understandable to your intended audience. And I would say probably the majority of financial aid communications are not understandable to a 17-year-old or to a parent who maybe didn't go to college themselves, or it's been 20 years or 25 years since they've been to college or more. And they also struggle with financial aid. So making the communications audience centric instead of institution centric. Most financial aid communications are institution centric.
Well, and to that point, I think it's also a hard topic just for a lot of people to talk about money, right? Like it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, not just for students and parents, but I would argue even as adults. Why do you think we're also uncomfortable talking about money?
Look, money, the way that money is handled in families is like fingerprints. It's unique. And it's also one of the most difficult topics to talk about, as you mentioned. There are lots of students applying for financial aid who don't see their own financial aid applications because parents don't want to know, don't want to share with their children their income or their assets. And so I come at it from the standpoint of trying to represent the institution's core values. And that's what I keep going back to. So if it's an institution, a lot of the schools that I work with are mission driven to expand college access, for example. And so what I'll do is I'll work with their team on a strategy that is either student centric or family centric, depending on what type of piece it is. And then really try to speak to the commonality of families, that this is a difficult topic. We're talking about $250,000, sometimes less, sometimes more, and a life changing decision for not just your student, but for your entire family. Of course, it's difficult. But if you're applying for financial aid, we all sort of need to get on the same page about a certain level of transparency from the institution standpoint. And we would expect the same from the student and family standpoint if you're going to rely on us for financial resources. For some reason, there's all of this time and energy and money spent on admissions communications, but precious little spent on financial aid communications, when they are, in the end, some of the only communications that your student and family will read over and over and over again as they're making a decision about not only where to apply, where to visit, where to enroll. It affects retention and graduation rates as well.
So to that point, do you feel like a lot of the communications that go out around financial aid need to not only inform, but not just say, hey, I'm here if you have any questions, reach out, but do something to prompt that student or parent to either connect with somebody on the financial aid staff, the admission staff? I mean, thoughts on that?
Well, I think my first thought would be that you can't build a relationship or connect with an audience if they don't understand what you're sending them. So, given that most financial aid communications fail that test, I would start there first, honestly. Prompting a family to take action when they don't really understand what you're sending them, or let's say a 17-year-old whose parents didn't go to college. They're struggling to understand the words and the jargon and the terminology that's in the emails that are being sent out. So, I would say fix that first and then work on developing a relationship, because in my opinion, this is about respecting the audience. If I'm writing to a 17-year-old for like a yield admissions communication, that's a completely different type of message. But money is intimidating, it's scary, it's this hurdle that a student has to cross in order to figure out how to get to college. Sometimes they have no one to help them. And so the financial aid communications should respect the student reading them by not assuming that they have a practitioner level understanding of financial aid.
And I totally agree. And I
Yeah,
just keep going back to this concept of, okay, if we're assuming our target audience knows little to absolutely nothing,
bingo.
how much is too much each time we communicate? Meaning, okay, we want to encourage them to, like, A, understand it's okay that you don't know a lot. We're going to try to help you with this.
Right.
But B, part of that may require you letting us know how you're feeling about it, what
Right.
you're wondering about. And so I feel like, again, if I'm hearing you right, it's that balance of how do we inform, but then how do we also create opportunities for engagement? Agree,
Right. And
disagree?
no, I totally agree. I think that the answer is complicated. I provided a broad answer because it's institution specific. There are institutions, when we've talked recently, there's institutions that don't even, the admissions team doesn't even know if a student has applied for financial aid when they make an admission decision. And then there are, admissions teams that are looking at, can we afford to enroll this student given their need, and everyone in between. And so um, making sure that the communications match your values. And so if you're a school that has a lot of financial aid resources to offer, maybe start there and say, you know, here's what we have to offer you. Here's what you have to do to get it. At the end, this is a very basic transaction that just feels very intimidating and complicated for students.
So websites obviously are a huge place that people are going to go, and I know you do a ton of audit stuff with college websites. Thoughts on how, the big, or where the biggest opportunities lie in terms of just colleges improving the user experience on websites specific to financial aid?
I think it's the investment. I think it's the level of investment. These projects need a champion. And there are also silos usually at some schools between admissions and aid, or sometimes aid is just sort of gets whatever's left over. So having someone on your team who is going to say, we're going to reimagine our financial aid communications, which very few people have said. I received an email from someone who's now a client who their entire email said, "We want to reimagine our financial aid communications to improve the student experience at our university. We want to make sure that they feel respected, that they feel just as valued as students who don't need aid. And so the biggest opportunity, quite frankly, is having someone behind this project and making sure that you hear from not only students and focus groups, as you mentioned, that you hear from families, not just the students, because the families are often struggling through trying to translate this information for their kid or for their family who's also helping with college. So, understanding your audience and then getting campus partners on board. Often you can share the load across not just financial aid and admissions, but advancement. Don't discount your partners on the advancement team, because especially for colleges that have a mission to enroll more first-gen students or college access, the advancement team, this is one of the win themes, let's say, for your institution. And if you are reimagining your financial aid communications, that's a college access initiative. Your college is undertaking an access initiative. I love those projects. So I think that's the biggest opportunity, is understanding the potential for not only how to boost your yield numbers or your retention numbers or quite frankly, your graduation rate, because graduation rate is often impacted by financial aid, but you're also going to reduce the number of emails that the financial aid team needs to answer. I talked to teams who had hundreds of messages waiting to be responded to on any given day because their communications are not serving students. And so all of these benefits there, getting someone behind it and explaining it to the institution and saying, this is a project that has a lot of legs. It can help a lot of people.
I do want to get your thoughts on, remind me, you're a parent who's gone through this process before?
I sure have. So when I was director of admissions communications at Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia. And I started that job in 2014, back in the early days of modern college marketing, in my opinion. And at the time, I also had a son who was starting high school. And so I got to see the entire process from both ends. And it really informed my experience marketing to students like my own son, and seeing them as individuals who do deserve to be talked to, not in a direct mail way, but in a way that is fun and engaging and all the things that we strive for as college marketers. But yes, I've been through this process.
So how do you balance it? Because to your point, I look at it from the college standpoint and I go, all right, the college wants to communicate with your son in that example and get him to understand how
Mm-hmm.
important this is and to start. But yet I would argue most 17 or 18-year-olds aren't ready to have that type of conversation, especially with an adult they don't know, even
Mm-hmm.
though it is important. So just any thoughts on where the balance lies as a parent who's lived through this, which is, hey, you got to start the conversation with the parents and then involve the student. No, it's got to be everybody. Just any thoughts on where the correct balance there lies if it's going to be, again, student-centered and audience-focused?
I think it's both and I would also add in counselors and CBO advisors. The balance, I think, is I mean, segmenting out communications for student versus family slash relatives versus counselor, I think, is really smart overall. Obviously, you can't count on students not to be engaged. There are students that are way more engaged than their parents. There are students who are who are putting their email address in for the parent email. Okay, this happens. And so I feel like everything that I said about respecting the audience about 17-year-olds, I think doing the same for parents. And obviously, if you've been through this, you have a bit of an edge, or if you're thinking about it because you're about to go through this as a parent, you're going to have an edge. But in terms of the sequence, junior year is when, a lot of college tours are planned, a lot of college visits are planned, whether they're digital or in person. College counselors are taking time to visit colleges on their own or to bring school groups to colleges. I think a lot of the campus visit experience is where you can zero in on whether it's a digital campus visit or an in-person campus visit. That's where I think your best opportunity is to connect the dots between the student and whoever is advising them.
Alrighty, we're going to play a game, guys, okay? So, first and foremost, get a pen, get a paper, pull out your notes app on your phone, whatever it might be, okay? Got it? Great. All right, what keywords does your website currently rank for? Take a couple seconds, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I gave you a few, not just a couple. What doesn't it rank for that you think it should rank for? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what are a few keyword opportunities that you could be winning on if you just simply tweaked some of your existing website copy? Got it? Okay, how'd you do? Ooh, not so hot. Not sure what you're currently ranking for, or not sure what you could be ranking for. Well, that's okay, because our friends at DD Agency want to help you answer all of these questions. DD Agency is a higher ed specific marketing technology agency that has conducted countless SEO audits for colleges and universities across the country. In these audits, they detail where you currently rank, what you could be ranking for, exactly how copy should be tweaked on website pages, and so much more. If this sounds like something that you could benefit from, give the guys at DD Agency a ping and be sure to mention that Enrollify sent you to claim a 10% discount on any of their SEO offerings. So head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO. That's DDA as in DD Agency, SEO, or simply follow the link in the show notes below. That will guarantee you get a 10% discount off of your audit. All right, head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO, or simply Google DD Agency, find DD Agency's website, and be sure to mention that you heard about them through Enrollify when you request your audit. All right, folks, back to the show.
In a perfect world, is that a one-on-one conversation, or you feel like even if you don't have the bandwidth, it can be a more effective conversation, for example, as part of an information session that accompanies a campus tour, if, to your point, the jargon isn't used and it's broken down a little bit differently?
Yes, if the college has already invested in robust financial aid communications that the student or parent or guardian can access later on demand. I mean, if it's a 30 or 45-minute financial aid info session that is audience centric and not filled with jargon and builds good rapport and explains the college's commitment, that's an excellent starting point. And then the family's going to leave and they're going to visit 5 more colleges that week and forget everything you said until they go back to your website. If the website doesn't support that same mission of having an audience centric website that's designed for self-service, I have a question. Am I going to be able to self-serve and find the answer on your website? Or am I going to have to either send an email and wait for a week to hear back from someone, which is intimidating. It's like emailing a bank about your mortgage. Or, no, really, or I'm going to cross that college off my list because they've shown me that it's just too hard for me to get the information that I need.
I
That's
think,
what I feel the
yeah,
messages from schools that aren't taking care of their, honestly, got to take care of your customers, right?
totally agree. And you hit it. I love the way you phrased that there, right? Because it is intimidating and it does become frustrating if they have to take an extra step in their brain to reach back out to somebody. So much of that could be alleviated, right? If we, again, had a bigger commitment as a college to those financial aid web pages and to saying, we know what the pain points are typically of our target audience, because, again, we've done focus group research, had enough conversations with students and parents. We're going to get out in front of these things. So when they do come back, because they have forgotten, to your point, all of this, it's right there in black and white in front of them in terms of explaining what they need to know, again, especially obviously the key points.
And it's not just in black and white. It's built for them. It's built for them to walk through the process. It's not built for the college to show off its resources or the college to cover its bases from a regulatory standpoint. I mean, again, it should be built for them.
Well, and it makes me wonder then, all right, as someone who lived that digital comms world, especially related to obviously financial aid, what is the right balance, do you think, for most schools? I understand there are going to be differences, right, depending on size,
Mm-hmm.
institutional focus, all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, you talked about videos, right? I don't see
Yes.
enough schools when I'm asked to do audits or when I'm looking at different things ahead of a training I might lead, where I'm like, where are your videos talking about financial aid? Oh, we don't have any of those.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you feel like in 2023, for example, this stuff needs to be, to your point, on demand?
I think it absolutely needs to be on demand because they are not operating according to your communications calendar 100% of the time. And so it has to be, whether it's video, whether it's a flow chart, diagram, whether it's pointing you to a great nonprofit third-party resource website that really explain things well, like a financial aid walkthrough video for one of the applications. I mean, I think especially for schools that have their own financial aid applications, schools that have a bespoke, proprietary financial aid application, having a walkthrough video of a fake student answering all the questions and applying for financial aid should be sort of a bare minimum requirement, because unlike the FAFSA or the CSS profile, the student can't get that information anywhere else.
Think about how we all process information in this day and age. Oh, I need to learn how to like fix something on my car that I don't know. Oh, I go to YouTube and I type in, why aren't there videos then? How do I fill out blankety blank form? How do I complete the FAFSA? And some have it, don't get me wrong, but to your point, if they have it, is it also in language that is understandable, that doesn't feel like it's super robotic and somebody just reading off a script and it's very stiff? And thoughts on that? I can see you've got some things you want to share.
Yeah. So you made me, when you were talking about the YouTube videos, I have to brag just for a moment that I years ago changed my own dryer belt. The YouTube video, I was very proud. I just needed a friend to come over and help me lift up the drum, but accomplished it. So yes, some of those things we need instructions. I would have spent a fortune otherwise doing that. But to your point about, having that on demand and making sure the students can get the information they need. Just to mention real quick, the other half of my business that's not higher ed is writing courses for high school students on behalf of school counseling offices about topics that include college admissions and financial aid. So I can't tell you how many units and lessons I have written for teenagers about how to dejargonize a college financial aid website. And then later that day, I myself will be dejargonizing a college financial aid website, right? And so I totally understand from both sides. The counselors are going, man, wouldn't it be better if colleges just actually, we didn't even need this lesson at all? And so I'm slowly working myself out of a job. But yeah, I think just really trying to put yourself in the shoes of how are they going to get through the process? How are you going to guide them? The opportunity is huge. There should be a whole customer journey goal through the financial aid website, for example.
So, how, for example, would you encourage a student to say, all right, if I need to be the one to start this conversation, or I know it's important and I'm not sure how I'm supposed to start it with my parents, like, where do I start that conversation?
Right. So when I write those courses for students, obviously I'm a partner to the school counseling team on staff at that school. And so they tell me about their student audience. Sometimes it's mostly students who come from an affluent background with some students who maybe don't. But I still want to make sure that we provide all the right information, regardless of need. And so the way that I design curriculum to encourage those conversations is to explain to students that this is a huge responsibility. It's also a huge opportunity to change your life and to give yourself access to your goals. And that if you have to do it on your own, it can be very expensive, or it can be far less expensive. Having a really frank conversation with your parents, if they're helping to fund it, would be beneficial, because the way that sort of the tack that I take with students and their families is, if you are asking for financial help, it makes good sense to be aware of the reason why, and to sort of say, okay, there's no shame in not being able to afford something that costs almost $300,000. Almost no one in this country can afford something out of operating expenses. It's a tiny slice. And so taking the shame out of it helps. Taking the stigma out of it helps, from the student standpoint. And then from the university standpoint, from the higher ed standpoint, they can take the stigma out of it too. And so part of that is, again, not using like third person language.
What's some examples you've seen? Because I know, again, I know the audience would love to hear just anything that's top of mind as you do your audits and see those things.
I would say, please examine all of the photography in your financial aid communications on your website, financial aid brochures. If your photography features students that are identifiable, make sure that those students have not only agreed to be featured in your financial aid communication, but also that like are they on aid? Do they want to be featured? I found that a lot of schools just pick students based on like how the picture is composed or quite frankly, like demographic concerns. And I think that's a mistake. I think that can send the wrong message to students and families and also can be problematic for your current students who maybe don't know that they're being promoted on a college affordability brochure that you're sending out or a website until someone tells them. And so my piece of advice would be to audit your imagery and think about how to put your best foot forward. There's certainly ways to do like a wide angle shot in the library that obviously is just a slice of campus instead of four students eating at a table together and you can see all their faces smiling and they're all in a certain demographic of student, let's say. I see a lot of that and I would
Yeah.
I would caution against that.
How do you make a financial aid message feel more personal, Tara?
Um, Make it feel more personal by standing out. If you actually pay attention to the audience, you'll be able to talk to them and you will sound like you're talking to them. If you're using first person language or second person language, you're having a conversation. You mentioned earlier in this podcast session that starting a conversation, actually do that on a financial aid website instead of talking about these amorphous students who might be reading the page. And so you can make it personal by taking down all those barriers and starting to build some rapport. They get all these great, oh my gosh, I almost know the people on the admissions team. I know what dogs they have. Like financial aid people, their whole goal is to give away money in the fairest way possible. They're wonderful people. And I think that the same effort and time and energy should be spent on personalizing those communications. Use the same approach. It works. I did a preliminary audit of a website that when it was using examples to illustrate how you might, let's say, visit a school or how you might pay for school, it used visiting a school on your family vacations and paying for a school. Some of your resource might include your trust fund. And so clearly, like a student who doesn't take family vacations very often with their the way that someone who can visit 15 colleges can, or someone with the trust, it was sending a message to a certain type of student and building a relationship with a certain type of student. So I think to me, there's so much potential in improving the way that colleges speak to students and their families about affordability and need. There's just so much opportunity there.
And step one for anybody listening, and Tara said it a couple of times, and I know other guests have said it around other topics I've talked about with them. Just go through things and take the time to audit, but don't just audit it yourself. Have your current students, have your current parents let them look at everything, let them give feedback, because what they tell you 100% is going to be applicable to the next class and probably even the next class and the next class coming after them. I do want to circle back to collaboration. You know this, having worked on college campus for a number of years. I feel like it's so hard on most, not all, but most college campuses, Tara, for admissions and financial aid to get on the same page when it comes to how are we effectively going to communicate financial aid to these students and families in a way that sounds like we're actually communicating internally and we're not doing this completely as separate. Why is it so hard, Tara, in your opinion, for admissions and financial aid to get on the same page? Like, what's the biggest disconnect? Where is it?
It's So I think first they have competing goals often. It's a natural friction that will never go away, which is that admissions will want to admit and enroll students, and financial aid can't really make that happen for all of the students that the admissions team wants to make it happen. I mean, we've all talked hopefully to admissions counselors who they wish they could have gotten more money for a student, those conversations. There's always going to be some natural friction around that. And they deal with completely different needs and goals and things. I mean, the annual financial aid audit is something that sticks in the mind of everyone on staff in your financial aid office. So there's always going to be these competing goals and needs, but also there isn't really someone on board at most schools to unite those two teams.
Whose job is that, in your opinion, then?
I've seen it work in a number of instances. Sometimes it can be someone in the communications office who has two internal clients. That was my role at Swarthmore. Um, and we were able to put together a suite of 10 new print pieces shortly after I came on board. That was sort of the first big project that I tackled. And we produced a financial aid piece. We produced a 82-page view book with financial aid sections together. We all were together on it. And so sometimes that can be someone in your comms office or your marketing office. Sometimes it can be a third party like me who comes in and does some pinch hitting on just like one project to get you on board together and get you guys talking. But the clients that I'm working with now, when we have meetings, it's someone, it's people from the admissions or marketing team and someone from the financial aid team. I can translate some of that, but I think someone who's a comm specialist who can say, okay, we know that you want it to say this, but it also has to say this because X. Like having that conversation is you need a specialist who can speak both languages, I think.
Well, totally agree with that. But if you don't have, we'll call it a specialist, or you don't bring in an outside party, I think the biggest thing I hope the audience takes away is you just have to get representation from both sides in the room, not just
Yes.
once, but on a consistent basis. I mean, I know the best admissions and enrollment marketing offices out there, and I include financial aid obviously within that. They have representation literally biweekly or at worst, absolutely monthly, where financial aid, admissions, enrollment marketing, and the other key stakeholders who all make up this college search and obviously retention as well, they're getting together and analyzing data in real time and having these conversations back and forth and
That's so
back and forth.
smart with the data. And this is a great year to be doing that because, as you know, the FAFSA is going to be released at least 2 months late. So it's really going to be a scramble this year. And if there was any other year that, I mean, out of every year, this is the year that I would pick to invest in doing that kind of work. Whether you have to hire someone from outside or dedicate your summer retreat to that, do something to get the teams on board because next fall and winter is going to be a struggle for both teams if you're not ready. It's going to be a brand new FAFSA and it's not being released until December. So having a plan this year to make sure that students aren't left stuck in that process. Take care of the student first. It's already going to be challenging enough.
Any other thoughts on all those recent changes that were announced to the FAFSA that you would, in terms of just initial thoughts you've had where you're like, okay, schools are going to need to do A and B, then a lot better that you're willing to share?
The FAFSA is going to be simplified, but we don't know how exactly. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of advance information coming out, even to financial aid administrators themselves. They don't have like a bat phone that they pick up and hear from the Fed. Guess what? We just decided on this section. Here's a sneak peek. They're getting the same information for the most part that the rest of us are. And so colleges need to be planning now for this. They have to be.
Last couple things we do, Tara, on every episode. I want to ask you a signature question and then do what I call some fun rapid fire. What's been the most influential resource for you over your career?
NASFA, the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators, probably at this point.
And why is that?
They really care about educating their constituency about how to help students through the aid process. They really care about it. And there's a lot of really good information there that's free for the taking.
Last thing we do is called Fun Rapid Fire. I'm just going to give you 4 or 5 things, and I just want some quick feedback. First things that come to your head, okay?
Okay.
Vegan food or vegan meal that everybody should try at least once, even if they're not vegan?
Um, I was vegetarian for 10 years. I'm drawing like I liked the Corn brand stuff. You know that QUORN? I think
I
it's
have
made out
no
of
idea what you're talking about.
mushroom stuff. It's a meat. It's one of these things where they have like they made this when I was a vegetarian. They made this fake chicken patty that was breaded, and I used to turn it into a chicken parm thing. Anyway, that's my own.
Underrated city anywhere in the world that you visited?
Oh, I have to say Philly. It's my favorite city in the world, but I'm a native, so I'm biased. Philadelphia. Everybody should visit.
Bigger rivalry, Eagles Cowboys or Eagles Giants?
Cowboys. For sure.
Biggest guilty pleasure is what?
I would say petting my favorite Maine Coon cat for too long during work, because he's sitting about 3 feet away and very distracting. And so I'll just sit, and that's my meditation session during the workday.
Well, we all need stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is to give us that break, or just to allow us to complete our work and our tasks. I just really appreciate you, Tara, being on today and willing to share so much knowledge and background around a subject that, again, it's hard to talk about, and we barely scratched the surface today. But I'm hopeful the audience took some of what we talked about and wrote some things down and thought, okay, what conversations do I need to have with other people on campus, or what things do we need to do now that are going to help us not only for next year, but years to come. Tara, if people want to connect with you, LinkedIn the best place to do that, or where else would you recommend they
LinkedIn or
go?
email, or through my website. I'm at Tara at Caerus Communications. It's CAERUS.
Tara, thanks so much for being on the show today. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jeremy Tiers. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.